An efficient and safe mass transport system is an important component to a well-ordered and functioning metropolis like Metro Manila. During the enhanced community quarantine imposed by authorities to combat the spread of the deadly COVID-19 virus, all forms of mass transport were shut down. As authorities begin to ease community quarantine restrictions as part of efforts to restart the economy, paralyzed by the lockdown, authorities have begun to allow mass transport services and operations to resume in phases, but under strict conditions and health safety protocols. Motoring Forum takes a look at how government is phasing in the public transport in Metro Manila. After nearly 3 months under enhanced community quarantine, a virtual lockdown with only essential services, workers, and travel outside homes allowed, Metro Manila was placed under general community quarantine. GCQ allowed more businesses, services, and trades to resume operations on condition. Strict guidelines and protocols meant to contain the spread of COVID-19 were observed. The DOTr, working with the MMDA and other stakeholders, was given the onus of ensuring that adequate and safe public transport is made available to thousands of commuters returning to work. Not everyone owns motorcycles or private vehicles now allowed under GCQ. Not all companies reopening could afford to provide shuttle services to employees as recommended by government guidelines. Constrained by Department of Health guidelines for containing the spread of the virus, the DOTr adopted what it described as a partial, gradual, calculated, and phased approach to providing mobility to commuters post-ECQ. Phase 1, implemented in the first 3 weeks under GCQ, from June 1 to 21, called for the resumption of operations of light transit rail services, P2P and city buses on identified routes, taxis and transport network vehicle service units, shuttle services, and tricycles. All were to comply with strict protocols that in effect reduced capacity to ensure physical distancing. Stringent health and safety measures were also made mandatory, including, among others, the wearing of masks, provision of hand sanitizers, temperature checks at train stations and bus terminals or loading zones. The use of cashless transactions through smartphone apps like GCash, PayMaya, AllPay, as well as Beep cards was strongly encouraged. Before GCQ was declared, the MMDA began work on preparing major thoroughfares, particularly EDSA, for the resumption of public transport in line with the DOTr's vision for the new normal. The exclusive lane on EDSA for buses was shifted to the innermost lane in preparation for the so-called carousel bus system with loading and unloading zones on the center island at strategic junctions on EDSA. No more buses racing and causing gridlock at intersections waiting for passengers. This is part of an initiative to rationalize bus routes being undertaken by the LTFRB. A lane for bicycle riders was delineated nearest the sidewalk or curb on EDSA, dovetailing with the DOTr's aim to encourage the use of non-motorized transport with the establishment of an interconnected network of bike lanes in Metro Manila. The LRT1, LRT2, MRT3, and the PNR also began preparing stations and trains to ensure the observation of physical distancing, as well as instituting other health and safety measures and processes to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Predictably, the first week of GCQ saw commuting chaos on EDSA and other major thoroughfares, with thousands stranded or taking hours to get to work or forced to head back home. Physical distancing was forgotten as commuters fought for space on the too few buses and other rides available. Meanwhile, traffic congestion began to reach pre-MECQ levels on parts of EDSA and other thoroughfares, and some bad habits returned, with a number of buses and shuttles caught filled to capacity. But then, transport authorities began to ramp up the number of buses and established more routes. By the time Phase 2 was to commence, the LTFRB reported that there were already 49,639 operational PUVs in Metro Manila, with 22,230 TNVS units and 19,409 taxis, plus 271 P2P buses operating in 28 routes. The LTFRB added that 31 rationalized city bus routes in Metro Manila and nearby provinces were now open and operational. Then, Phase 2 began with modern jeepneys allowed to operate, again with limited capacity, in 15 routes serving areas in Metro Manila on June 22. The modern jeepneys must be equipped with a global navigation satellite system or global positioning system for proper monitoring of movement, as well as provisions to allow cashless payment. 2 days later, the LTFRB opened 9 more routes to modern jeepneys, followed by 10 more routes on June 26. The LTFRB also promised that before the month of June ended, UV Express units would have been allowed to resume operations under strict protocols. One mode of public transport that is obviously missing in both phases of the GCQ transport plan is the traditional jeepneys. Drivers of traditional jeepneys have taken to begging for help from motorists. Many fear that the government is using the COVID-19 pandemic to finally phase them out of existence. However, transport authorities held out hope for traditional jeepney operators and drivers to resume operation, but only in areas where trains, buses, modern jeepneys, and UV Express units are not enough to meet the demand for public transport. But they also have to show their jeepney units are roadworthy and comply with health, safety, sanitation, and security protocols. Meanwhile, transport operators now allowed to operate at virtually half capacity say that they can't operate at a loss for long and that they need some form of subsidy to continue. Metro Manila and the rest of the country are still in the thick of the fight to survive and overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. Many believe that the economy cannot survive another hard lockdown. For the economy and communities to survive, the government must ensure the continuous provision of safe and adequate public transport. The success of the government's efforts in phasing in mass transport in Metro Manila will not only be determined by how many commuters are efficiently served, but also, and perhaps more importantly, if the resumption of operations of buses, trains, and other forms of public transport does not result in a rise of the number in COVID-19 cases. That's it for Motoring Forum this week, courtesy of Suzuki Philippines.